when I received the wedding invitation in my mailbox. I thought it was a cruel joke until I saw the venue address. My ex-husband's new fiancée had copied every single detail from our wedding 5 years earlier, down to the exact flowers and menu choices. But when I discovered she had ordered the identical designer dress I wore on my wedding day, I knew I had to take action that would leave everyone speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had successfully moved past the painful chapter of my divorce from David Thornton. After 5 years of rebuilding my life as a financial consultant in downtown Seattle, I had finally reached a place of genuine contentment. My small consulting firm was thriving, I had purchased my own condominium overlooking Elliott Bay, and I was even considering dating again after years of focusing solely on professional and personal recovery. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in September. I was reviewing quarterly reports for my largest client, when my assistant, Maria Santos, knocked on my office door with an expression I had never seen before. Maria had worked with me for 3 years, and her typically cheerful demeanor was replaced by something between confusion and concern. "Elena, this came in today's mail delivery," she said, holding an elegant cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. "I think you need to see this immediately." The envelope was addressed to Elena Rodriguez in flowing calligraphy that looked professionally done. The return address showed no name, only a post office box in Bellevue, Washington. As I opened the envelope, expensive cardstock emerged, revealing a formal wedding invitation that made my breath catch in my throat. "David Michael Thornton and Sophia Christine Blackwell request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony on Saturday, October 14th, 2023, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at Chateau Ste. Michelle Winery, Woodinville, Washington." The invitation continued with reception details, dress code specifications, and RSVP information, but I could barely process the words beyond the venue name. Chateau Ste. Michelle Winery was exactly where David and I had been married 5 years earlier. The date was October 14th, precisely 1 week after our original wedding anniversary. Maria watched my face carefully as the implications sank in. "Is that the same place where you and Mr. Thornton had your wedding?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak as memories flooded back. Our wedding at Chateau Ste. Michelle had been the culmination of 18 months of careful planning. We had chosen the venue specifically because of its romantic vineyard setting and the stunning views of the Cascade Mountains. The outdoor ceremony space overlooked rolling hills of grapevines, and the reception hall featured floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the golden hour light perfectly. David and I had spent countless Saturday afternoons at the winery, tasting different vintages and imagining our perfect day. We had selected every detail together, from the white garden roses and baby's breath arrangements to the Pacific Northwest salmon dinner and the 3-tier vanilla cake with fresh berry filling. Everything had been chosen to reflect our shared vision of elegant simplicity. The wedding had been beautiful, attended by 120 guests who celebrated what everyone believed was the beginning of a lifelong partnership. Even now, 5 years after our divorce, I could remember the overwhelming joy I felt walking down that aisle toward David, believing we were starting forever together. But our marriage had deteriorated within 2 years, due to David's increasing absence from our relationship. His pharmaceutical sales career required extensive travel, and what initially seemed like temporary challenges became permanent patterns of disconnection. David would disappear for weeks at a time, claiming client obligations, only for me to discover through mutual friends that he was attending social events and industry conferences without ever mentioning them to me. The divorce proceedings had been relatively amicable, primarily because I was exhausted from fighting for attention from someone who had clearly checked out emotionally. We divided our assets fairly, sold our shared home, and agreed to minimal contact moving forward. David had moved to the east side of Seattle, and I had heard through mutual acquaintances that he was dating someone new, but I had deliberately avoided learning details. Now, staring at this wedding invitation, I realized that someone new was Sophia Blackwell, and apparently their relationship had progressed to marriage. What disturbed me far more than David remarrying was the choice to use our exact wedding venue on a date so close to our anniversary. I spent the remainder of that Tuesday attempting to focus on work, but the invitation seemed to burn through my desk drawer where I had placed it. By evening, curiosity had overwhelmed my desire to remain uninvolved in David's new life. I found myself researching Sophia Blackwell online, discovering she was a marketing director at a technology company downtown, originally from Portland, Oregon, and apparently quite active on social media platforms. Sophia's Instagram account was public, featuring numerous photos of her engagement to David, romantic dinners at upscale restaurants, and weekend trips to locations I recognized from my own marriage. But what made my stomach turn was scrolling back through her posts from the past 6 months, which documented their wedding planning process in extensive detail. The similarities between Sophia's choices and my original wedding were impossible to ignore. She had posted photos from Chateau Saint Michel with captions about finding the perfect venue, apparently taken during the same season when David and I had done our initial site visit. Her floral arrangements featured white garden roses and baby's breath, identical to what I had selected. She had shared images of menu tastings that included Pacific Northwest salmon as the main course. Even more unsettling was a post from 2 weeks earlier showing Sophia's bridesmaid dress selection. The dresses were navy blue chiffon in an A-line silhouette, exactly matching what my bridesmaids had worn. The post included a caption about choosing timeless elegance that would photograph beautifully against the vineyard setting. I closed my laptop and poured myself a glass of wine, trying to process what felt like an elaborate recreation of my own wedding. The logical part of my mind suggested these could be coincidences. Chateau Saint Michel was a popular wedding venue, white roses were classic bridal flowers, and salmon was a common Pacific Northwest dinner choice. But the accumulated similarities felt too numerous and specific to be accidental. The following morning, I found myself unable to concentrate during client meetings. Every conversation felt distant and unimportant compared to the growing certainty that Sophia was deliberately copying elements from my wedding. During my lunch break, I made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable just days earlier. I called Chateau Saint Michel directly. "Good afternoon, this is Jennifer at Chateau Saint Michel Events Department." The familiar voice answered. Jennifer Walsh had been our wedding coordinator 5 years earlier, and I recognized her warm, professional tone immediately. "Hello, Jennifer, this is Elena Rodriguez. You coordinated my wedding to David Thornton in October 2018, I said, hoping she would remember me among the hundreds of weddings she had managed. "Elena, of course I remember you. Your wedding was absolutely beautiful. How are you doing?" Jennifer's enthusiasm seemed genuine, apparently unaware of our divorce. "I'm doing well, thank you. I'm calling because I received an invitation to David's upcoming wedding in October, and I noticed it's being held at your venue again. I wanted to ask about some of the planning details," I said carefully. There was a brief pause before Jennifer responded. "Oh my, I didn't realize you and David had divorced. I'm so sorry to bring up awkward memories. Yes, we are hosting David's wedding to Sophia next month. It's been quite interesting working with them, actually." "Interesting how?" I asked, sensing Jennifer had more to share. "Well, Sophia came to our initial consultation with very specific requests. She had detailed notes about floral arrangements, menu selections, and ceremony setup that were remarkably similar to your wedding. When I mentioned that some of her choices were identical to a previous wedding we had hosted, she seemed pleased rather than concerned about originality. My suspicions were being confirmed by someone who had witnessed both planning processes. Did she mention having seen our wedding somehow? Not directly, but she did ask several times about accessing photos from previous events for inspiration. She seemed particularly interested in weddings from 2018. We don't typically share client photos without permission, but she was quite persistent. The conversation with Jennifer lasted another 10 minutes, during which she revealed additional details that painted a clear picture of intentional replication. Sophia had requested the exact ceremony setup we had used, including the specific arch placement and aisle decoration. She had asked about the same bridal suite for getting ready, and had even inquired about the timeline we had followed for photos and reception events. Most disturbing was Jennifer's revelation that Sophia had asked specifically about my wedding dress. She had described wanting something that would complement the vineyard setting perfectly, and had asked if Jennifer remembered details about previous bridal gown choices that had photographed well at the venue. I told her that one bride in particular had worn a stunning dress that looked like it was made for our setting, Jennifer admitted. I may have mentioned that it was a classic ball gown silhouette with intricate beadwork. I hope that wasn't inappropriate. My wedding dress had been custom designed by Madeline Forrester, a local designer known for creating one-of-a-kind gowns for discerning brides. The dress featured a fitted bodice with hand-sewn crystal beading that caught the light beautifully, flowing into a full tulle skirt that created a fairy tale silhouette. Madeline had worked with me for 4 months to create something unique that reflected my personal style while being appropriate for an outdoor vineyard ceremony. The dress had cost $8,000, representing a significant investment that had been worth every penny when I saw the final result. The beadwork was intricate and time-consuming, featuring a pattern that Madeline had designed specifically for me. The tulle skirt had multiple layers that created volume without being overwhelming, and the overall effect was both romantic and sophisticated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After my divorce, the dress had been preserved and stored in my closet, wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, and kept in a climate-controlled garment bag. I had considered selling it several times but could never bring myself to part with something so beautiful, even though I would never wear it again. Now, with growing dread, I wondered if Sophia had somehow obtained information about my specific dress design. The possibility that she might be planning to wear something similar or even identical felt like the final violation of my original wedding memories. That evening, I made another decision that surprised me with its boldness. I contacted Madeline Forrester's design studio to inquire about recent commissions. Madeline had become quite successful in the 5 years since creating my dress, and her studio now employed several assistants to help with the increased demand for her work. "Elena, how wonderful to hear from you." Madeline's voice was as warm and creative as I remembered. "I hope you're doing well. Is there something I can help you with?" "I'm calling about something rather unusual," I began, then explained the situation with David's upcoming wedding, and my suspicions about Sophia copying our original celebration. Madeline listened carefully before responding with obvious concern. "Elena, this is quite troubling. I need to tell you that I did receive an inquiry several months ago from someone who described wanting a dress very similar to yours. She provided detailed photos and descriptions that were remarkably specific." My heart sank as Madeline continued. "The woman claimed to be a friend of yours who had admired your dress and hoped to create something inspired by it for her own wedding. She said you had recommended my work and suggested she contact me directly. Did you create a dress for her?" I asked, dreading the answer. "I declined the commission," Madeline said firmly. Something felt wrong about the request. She was asking for an exact replica, rather than something inspired by your design. When I explained that I don't duplicate previous work, she became quite insistent and offered to pay significantly more than my usual fee. Relief flooded through me until Madeline added, "However, she may have found another designer willing to recreate the design. She had professional photographs of your dress from multiple angles, which would give any competent designer enough information to reproduce it fairly accurately." The photographs Madeline mentioned could only have come from our wedding album. David had received copies of all the professional images, and apparently he had shared them with Sophia for the explicit purpose of replicating my dress design. The violation felt complete and deeply personal. Sophia wasn't just copying the venue, flowers, and menu from my wedding. She was attempting to step into my exact role, wearing my dress design in the same location where I had married David 5 years earlier. The level of deliberate imitation felt beyond coincidence or even poor judgment. This was calculated appropriation of my most personal memories. I spent that night lying awake, alternating between hurt and anger. The hurt came from realizing that David had been willing to share intimate details of our wedding with another woman for the purpose of recreation. The anger stemmed from Sophia's apparent belief that she could simply take elements from my life and use them to create her own perfect day. By morning, hurt had transformed into determination. If Sophia wanted to play this game of imitation, I would ensure she understood exactly whose memories she was attempting to steal. The idea that formed in my mind was bold, potentially controversial, and definitely outside my normal conflict resolution approach. But sometimes, when someone crosses lines that should never be crossed, the only appropriate response is to meet their audacity with your own strategic action. Before we continue with how I decided to handle this unprecedented situation, I want to thank you for joining me in this story about standing up for yourself when someone tries to steal your most precious memories. If you believe in protecting what's rightfully yours and refusing to let others diminish your experiences, please consider subscribing. It helps us reach more people who need to hear stories about finding strength in difficult situations. The next phase of this story involves careful planning, bold decision-making, and ultimately showing Sophia exactly what happens when you try to copy someone else's life. What I discovered during my investigation phase would only strengthen my resolve to take action that would be remembered long after her attempted wedding ceremony concluded. The morning after my conversation with Madeline Forrester, I woke with a clarity of purpose that surprised me. The initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something more powerful: determination to reclaim control of a narrative that Sophia believed she could rewrite. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed someone I barely recognized. Gone was the uncertain woman who had spent 5 years avoiding confrontation with her past. In her place stood someone ready to take decisive action. My first step was to retrieve my wedding dress from its carefully preserved storage. The climate-controlled closet in my spare bedroom had protected the gown perfectly. As I unzipped the garment bag, the familiar scent of preservation sachets mixed with the faint trace of the perfume I had worn on my wedding day. The dress emerged as pristine as the day Madeline had completed the final fitting. Holding the gown against myself in front of the full-length mirror, I was struck by how perfectly it still fit my figure. The intricate beadwork caught the morning light streaming through my bedroom windows, creating the same magical sparkle that had captivated everyone at my original wedding. The fitted bodice accentuated my silhouette, while the flowing tulle skirt created an elegant ball gown shape that felt both timeless and distinctly personal. This dress represented far more than fabric and embellishment. It embodied months of collaboration with Madeline, countless fittings to achieve the perfect silhouette, and careful selection of every crystal and bead to create a design that reflected my personality and vision. The dress was a tangible representation of my hopes, dreams, and the significant financial investment I had made in creating something truly special for the most important day of my life. Sophia's attempt to replicate this design felt like theft of the most personal kind. She was trying to steal not just the appearance of my dress, but the emotions, memories, and unique identity that came with it. The violation extended beyond simple copying into something that challenged my very sense of ownership over my own experiences. As I carefully rehung the dress, my phone rang with a call from my younger sister, Carmen Rodriguez Murphy, who lived in Portland with her husband and 2 children. Carmen had always been my closest confidant, and her timing seemed providential. "Elena, I just saw the most bizarre thing on social media," Carmen said without preamble. One of my college friends shared an engagement photo that looked familiar, and when I looked closer, I realized the woman is getting married at the same place you and David had your wedding. Is this some kind of weird coincidence? Carmen had attended my wedding and remembered every detail of the celebration. Her memory for visual details was exceptional, honed by her career as an interior designer. If anyone would recognize the similarities between my wedding and Sophia's plans, it would be Carmen. "It's not a coincidence," I replied, then spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything I had discovered about Sophia's systematic copying of my wedding elements. Carmen listened with growing outrage, occasionally interjecting with expressions of disbelief at the audacity of the situation. "This is absolutely unacceptable," Carmen declared when I finished. "You cannot let this woman steal your wedding and pretend it's her own creation. What are you planning to do about it?" Quote. The question that had been forming in my mind for the past 24 hours finally crystallized into words. "I'm going to attend their wedding," I said. "And I'm going to wear my dress." The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds before Carmen responded. "Elena, that's either the most brilliant idea you've ever had or the most catastrophic. Possibly both." Carmen's reaction mirrored my own internal debate. The plan was undeniably bold, potentially controversial, and certainly outside the boundaries of conventional wedding etiquette. But conventional etiquette assumed that brides would create their own unique celebrations, rather than appropriating someone else's carefully planned memories. Think about it logically, I continued, my voice gaining strength as I articulated the reasoning. Sophia has copied every element of my wedding except the bride herself. She's wearing my dress design, in my venue, with my flowers, eating my menu, probably following my timeline. The only thing missing from her recreation is me. So I'll simply complete the picture for her. Carmen was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. You realize this will create an enormous scene. Everyone will be talking about it, probably recording it, definitely posting about it on social media. Are you prepared for that level of attention? The prospect of public attention had concerned me initially, but I had reached a different perspective overnight. Carmen, I've spent 5 years being the quiet, dignified ex-wife who disappeared gracefully after my marriage ended. I've been polite, private, and completely non-confrontational. Where has that gotten me? Someone feels comfortable enough to steal my most precious memories because they assume I'll continue being quiet and polite. My sister understood the deeper principle at stake. This wasn't about creating drama or seeking revenge. This was about establishing boundaries and refusing to allow someone to diminish the significance of my experiences. Sophia's actions suggested a fundamental disrespect for my identity and history. Allowing her to proceed without challenge would essentially validate her belief that my memories were available for appropriation. What kind of reaction are you expecting from David? Carmen asked. David's potential response was something I had considered extensively. Our relationship had ended without dramatic confrontation, primarily because I had chosen to avoid conflict rather than fight for his attention. In many ways, my current situation represented the confrontation we had never had during our marriage or divorce. David enabled this situation by sharing our wedding details with Sophia, I replied. He either actively participated in planning this recreation, or he was too weak to stop it when he realized what was happening. Either way, he bears responsibility for this violation. Carmen's support proved instrumental in developing the practical aspects of my plan. As an interior designer, she understood the importance of visual impact and strategic presentation. She immediately grasped that my appearance at the wedding needed to be flawlessly executed to achieve maximum effect. If you're going to do this, you need to do it perfectly, Carmen advised. Your dress needs to be impeccable, your hair and makeup need to be flawless, and your timing needs to be strategic. You can't look like you're desperate or unhinged. You need to look like you belong there, because in a very real sense you do. Carmen offered to fly to Seattle the weekend before the wedding to help with preparation. Her expertise in styling and presentation would ensure that every detail of my appearance conveyed confidence and dignity rather than desperation or revenge. The distinction was crucial for maintaining the moral high ground in what would inevitably become a highly scrutinized situation. The week following my conversation with Carmen was spent in careful preparation that felt remarkably similar to planning my original wedding. I scheduled appointments for hair and makeup trials, ensuring that my appearance would be polished and photographer-ready. I selected understated jewelry that would complement the dress without competing with its intricate beadwork. I even practiced walking in the gown to ensure my movements would appear natural and confident. Most importantly, I spent considerable time developing my mental and emotional preparation for the confrontation ahead. This wasn't about creating chaos or seeking attention. This was about reclaiming ownership of my own narrative and demonstrating that some boundaries should never be crossed. My research into Sophia's background had revealed additional details that strengthened my resolve. Through professional networking platforms, I discovered that Sophia worked in marketing for a technology company that specialized in brand development and market positioning. Her entire career was built on understanding how to appropriate successful elements from competitors and repurpose them for her own clients' benefit. Sophia's professional expertise made her copying of my wedding even more calculated and deliberate. This wasn't the result of poor judgment or innocent inspiration. This was someone with extensive experience in strategic appropriation, applying those skills to her personal life. She understood exactly what she was doing and had chosen to proceed anyway. The irony was profound. Sophia's career involved helping companies protect their intellectual property and unique market positioning from competitors who might try to copy their successful strategies. Yet she felt entitled to appropriate the most personal and creative work of my life for her own benefit. My investigation also revealed that Sophia had a pattern of borrowing heavily from others in her personal life. Her social media history showed a progression of interests and styles that seemed to shift dramatically whenever she entered new social circles. Her home decorating style, vacation destinations, and even her fashion choices appeared to mirror those of friends and colleagues rather than reflecting consistent personal preferences. David had apparently become involved with someone whose entire identity was built on adopting elements from other people's lives. The realization helped explain how their relationship had progressed so quickly to marriage. Sophia excelled at becoming whatever her romantic partner wanted her to be, rather than offering an authentic personality of her own. This pattern made her copying of my wedding even more disturbing. She wasn't just appropriating my creative choices. She was attempting to step into my entire identity as David's wife. The wedding recreation was her method of literally becoming me in David's life, complete with the same setting, details, and even dress design that had defined my relationship with him. Understanding Sophia's psychological approach to relationships strengthened my conviction that direct confrontation was necessary. Someone who built their identity on appropriating others' lives would only respond to clear, unmistakable boundaries. Polite requests or private conversations would be ineffective against someone whose entire modus operandi involved taking what belonged to others. The weekend before the wedding, Carmen arrived in Seattle with a positive energy that reminded me why she had always been my closest ally. She immediately set about organizing every aspect of my preparation with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing complex design projects under tight deadlines. "Elena, this is going to be legendary," Carmen declared as she unpacked professional-grade hairstyling equipment in my bathroom. 20 years from now, people will still be talking about the day you showed up to your own wedding, because that's essentially what this is, isn't it? Sophia created a replica of your wedding, so you're simply attending your own event. Carmen's perspective reframed the entire situation in terms that felt empowering rather than confrontational. I wasn't crashing someone else's wedding. I was reclaiming my own carefully planned celebration that had been appropriated without permission. The distinction was subtle, but psychologically significant. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of perfect October weather that made Seattle's reputation for constant rain seem completely unfounded. The temperature was ideal for an outdoor wedding ceremony, and the forecast promised golden afternoon light that would make any photographs stunning. Carmen helped me into my dress with the same careful attention to detail that my original bridesmaids had provided 5 years earlier. Every hook was fastened perfectly, every seam lay smoothly, and every crystal caught the light exactly as intended. The final result was flawless. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman who looked like she was preparing for her own wedding day. The dress fit as though it had been designed yesterday rather than 5 years ago. My hair fell in soft waves that complemented the romantic style of the gown, and my makeup was elegant and timeless. I looked like a bride who belonged at a sophisticated vineyard wedding. "You look absolutely magnificent," Carmen said, adjusting the final details of my appearance. Sophia is going to understand exactly whose wedding she attempted to steal. The drive to Chateau Saint. Michelle felt surreal. Carmen accompanied me for moral support, dressed in an elegant navy dress that would allow her to blend seamlessly among the wedding guests. We had timed our arrival to coincide with the cocktail hour preceding the ceremony, ensuring that we would have an audience of assembled guests when I made my entrance. As we pulled into the familiar parking area of the winery, memories of my own wedding day flooded back. The same stunning views of the vineyard stretched toward the Cascade Mountains. The same elegant stone buildings housed the reception facilities. Even the landscaping appeared unchanged from 5 years earlier. "Are you ready for this?" Carmen asked as we sat in the car, watching well-dressed guests walking toward the ceremony area. The question required only a moment's consideration. I had spent the week preparing mentally and emotionally for this confrontation. I understood the potential consequences, and had accepted responsibility for whatever reactions my appearance might provoke. Most importantly, I had reached a place of genuine peace with my decision. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied. We stepped out of the car and began walking toward the ceremony site, my train flowing behind me across the manicured grass. Other guests turned to look as we approached, their expressions ranging from confusion to recognition to dawning understanding of what they were witnessing. The moment of truth was about to arrive. Sophia would soon discover that some violations have consequences, and some boundaries should never be crossed. The woman who had spent months planning to appropriate my most precious memories was about to learn what happens when the original owner decides to reclaim what belongs to her. The cocktail reception area at Chateau Saint. Michelle buzzed with the familiar energy of a wedding celebration in progress. Guests mingled among the vineyard rows, champagne glasses catching the afternoon sunlight as conversations flowed around tables draped in crisp, white linens. The scene was exactly as I remembered from my own wedding, down to the placement of the bar stations and the arrangement of cocktail tables overlooking the valley. Carmen and I approached the reception area with measured steps, my train flowing elegantly behind me across the manicured grass. The first guests to notice our arrival were a couple standing near the entrance, their animated conversations stopping mid-sentence as they registered my appearance. The woman's eyes widened as she took in my dress, then moved to my face with dawning recognition. "Is that Elena Rodriguez?" she whispered to her companion, apparently unaware that her voice carried clearly in the outdoor setting. Within moments, a ripple of awareness spread through the cocktail reception like a stone dropped into still water. Conversations halted as guests turned to observe my entrance, their expressions shifting from casual curiosity to stunned recognition. Many of these people had attended my original wedding to David 5 years earlier, and they clearly remembered the dress that had been the centerpiece of that celebration. Jennifer Walsh, the venue coordinator, appeared at my side with the professional composure that had made her so effective during my wedding planning. Her face showed a mixture of admiration and concern as she processed the situation unfolding before her. "Elena, you look absolutely stunning," Jennifer said quietly. "I must say this is certainly an unprecedented situation in my 20 years of coordinating weddings at this venue." Her diplomatic response acknowledged both the beauty of my appearance and the complexity of my presence, without taking sides in what was clearly becoming a charged situation. Jennifer understood that her role required maintaining neutrality while ensuring the safety and comfort of all parties involved. "Thank you, Jennifer. I assume the ceremony is proceeding on schedule?" I replied, maintaining the same composed tone I would use for any normal wedding conversation. "Yes. The bridal party is completing their final preparations in the main building. The processional should begin in approximately 15 minutes. Jennifer paused before adding, "Elena, I want you to know that I had no idea the dress situation would develop as it has. If I had understood the full scope of the similarities, I would have addressed it during the planning process." Jennifer's comment confirmed what I had suspected about the extent of Sophia's copying. Even the professional venue coordinator, who had witnessed hundreds of weddings, found the level of replication remarkable enough to warrant concern. Carmen positioned herself strategically near the ceremony seating area, providing both moral support and ensuring she would have an optimal view of the proceedings. Her presence gave me additional confidence, knowing that someone who understood my motivations completely was witness to whatever unfolded next. The guests continued to observe my presence with fascination, their conversations now focused entirely on the implications of my attendance. I could hear fragments of discussion as people attempted to process the unprecedented situation of an ex-wife appearing at her former husband's wedding wearing the exact dress from their original ceremony. "She looks exactly like she did at her own wedding," one woman commented to her table mates. "That dress is absolutely gorgeous, but this is such an awkward situation." "David must be mortified," another guest replied. "How do you even handle something like this? And what is Sophia going to think when she sees Elena wearing that dress?" The speculation among the guests revealed that most people present understood the significance of my appearance. They recognized that this was not a coincidence or a fashion mistake, but a deliberate statement about the appropriation that had taken place during Sophia's wedding planning. At precisely 4 o'clock, the string quartet positioned near the ceremony altar began playing the prelude music that would signal the beginning of the processional. Guests moved from the cocktail area toward the rows of white chairs arranged in a semicircle facing the vineyard vista. The ceremony setup was identical to my original wedding, including the placement of the floral arch and the positioning of the aisle runner. I took my seat in the back row, choosing a position that would provide clear visibility of the proceedings, while avoiding unnecessary disruption during the ceremony itself. My goal was not to create chaos during the actual vows, but to ensure that my presence was unmistakably noted by the bride, groom, and assembled guests. The processional began with the familiar strains of Pachelbel's Canon, the same musical selection David and I had chosen for my entrance 5 years earlier. The bridesmaids appeared first, walking down the aisle in navy blue chiffon dresses that were identical to those worn by my original bridal party. Each woman carried a bouquet of white garden roses and baby's breath, completing the recreation of my wedding's visual elements. David emerged from the side entrance looking distinguished in a classic black tuxedo, his appearance remarkably similar to how he had looked on our wedding day. His face showed the expected nervousness of any groom, but I noticed his eyes scanning the assembled guests with what appeared to be growing anxiety. When his gaze reached my location, his expression shifted from nervousness to shock, then to something approaching panic. The moment David saw me, his composure visibly cracked. His face went pale, and he gripped the altar railing for support, as if he needed physical stability to process what he was witnessing. The realization that his ex-wife was attending his wedding wearing her original dress clearly exceeded any scenario he had imagined or prepared for emotionally. Pastor Michael Harrison, the same officiant who had performed our original ceremony, took his position at the altar with the serene confidence of someone who had presided over countless weddings. He appeared unaware of the tension building among the guests as they anticipated Sophia's entrance and her reaction to discovering my presence. The bridal march began, and Sophia appeared at the back of the aisle accompanied by her father. Even from my position in the rear seating, I could see that her dress was indeed a close replica of my original design. The silhouette was nearly identical, featuring the same fitted bodice and full tulle skirt that had defined my gown. While the beadwork was different in detail, the overall effect was unmistakably similar to my dress. Sophia began her processional with the radiant smile typical of any bride on her wedding day. Her happiness was evident as she moved down the aisle toward David, apparently unaware of anything unusual about the gathered guests or their unusually intense attention to her appearance. It was only when Sophia reached the halfway point of her walk that she noticed the unusual energy among the wedding guests. Faces that should have been focused admiringly on her were instead turning to look toward the back of the ceremony seating. Following their gaze, Sophia's eyes found me sitting in the last row, wearing the original version of the dress she was attempting to replicate. The moment Sophia saw me, her processional came to an abrupt halt. Her radiant bridal smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of shock that quickly transformed into something approaching horror. She stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, her bouquet trembling in her hands as she processed the implications of my presence. The wedding guests, already aware of the building tension, turned their attention between Sophia and me, with the fascination of people witnessing an unprecedented social situation. The silence that had fallen over the ceremony was broken only by the continued playing of the bridal march, which now seemed inappropriately cheerful given the drama unfolding before the altar. David, realizing that something had disrupted Sophia's processional, looked toward the back of the ceremony seating and saw his bride staring directly at me. His face showed a mixture of embarrassment, anger, and resignation, as he understood that the confrontation he had apparently hoped to avoid was now inevitable. Sophia remained motionless in the aisle for what felt like several minutes but was probably only 30 seconds. The photographer, unaware of the underlying drama, continued taking pictures of what he likely assumed was simply a bride, pausing to compose herself before completing her walk to the altar. Finally, Sophia's father placed a gentle hand on her arm and whispered something that encouraged her to continue moving toward David. Her remaining steps down the aisle were mechanical and forced, lacking the joy and confidence she had displayed at the beginning of her processional. When Sophia reached the altar, she positioned herself beside David but immediately turned to look directly at me again. Her eyes moved from my face to my dress, confirming beyond any doubt that she recognized exactly what she was seeing. The original version of the dress she was wearing, worn by the original bride at the original venue on a date 1 week after the original anniversary. Pastor Harrison, sensing the unusual tension but maintaining his professional composure, began the ceremony with his traditional opening remarks about the sacred nature of marriage and the commitment being made before God and the assembled witnesses. His words seemed to hang in the air as both Sophia and David struggled to focus on the proceedings while remaining acutely aware of my presence. During the opening prayer, I observed Sophia's continued distraction as she repeatedly glanced toward my seating area. Her discomfort was evident to anyone paying attention, and many of the wedding guests were clearly more interested in the unfolding drama than in the actual ceremony they had come to witness. The first reading was delivered by one of David's college friends, who had also participated in our original wedding ceremony. As he spoke about love, commitment, and the importance of building a marriage on foundations of trust and honesty, the irony was not lost on anyone who understood the circumstances surrounding Sophia's wedding planning choices. When Pastor Harrison reached the portion of the ceremony calling for the exchange of vows, Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. Instead of facing David to recite the promises they had presumably written together, she turned toward the assembled guests and spoke directly to me. "This is supposed to be my wedding day," Sophia declared, her voice carrying clearly across the ceremony space. "You have no right to be here, and you certainly have no right to wear that dress to my wedding." The accusation hung in the air as guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uncertain about how to respond to such an unprecedented breach of wedding etiquette. Pastor Harrison looked bewildered, apparently having never encountered a situation where the bride addressed someone other than the groom during the vow exchange portion of the ceremony. I rose from my seat with the same composed dignity I had maintained throughout the afternoon, allowing my full appearance in the dress to be visible to everyone present. The afternoon sunlight caught the intricate beadwork exactly as it had during my original wedding, creating the same magical sparkle that had captivated guests 5 years earlier. "Sophia," I replied, my voice calm and clear enough for everyone to hear. "This is my dress, at my venue, with my flowers, my menu, and my ceremony setup. You have copied every element of my wedding except the bride. I am simply completing the picture you created." The directness of my response appeared to surprise Sophia, who had perhaps expected me to be embarrassed or defensive about my presence. Instead, my calm acknowledgement of the situation placed the focus squarely on her choices rather than my response to them. David finally found his voice and attempted to intervene. "Elena, please don't do this. Today is supposed to be about Sophia and me starting our new life together." His plea revealed either remarkable obliviousness to the situation or willful denial about his role in enabling Sophia's copying behavior. The idea that I was somehow disrupting their new beginning ignored the fact that their beginning was built on appropriating the most significant day of my previous relationship with him. "David," I replied, maintaining the same composed tone, "your new life appears to be an exact replica of our old life. I am wearing my original dress to my original venue on the anniversary week of my original wedding. If you wanted to start fresh, you should have chosen fresh elements rather than copying everything we created together." Quote, my response articulated the core issue in terms that made Sophia's behavior impossible to defend or minimize. She had not simply drawn inspiration from our wedding. She had systematically recreated it in detail, then expected to proceed without acknowledgement or consequence. The confrontation that followed would reveal exactly how far Sophia was willing to go to defend her appropriation of my wedding, and how prepared I was to protect the memories and creative work she had attempted to steal. The silence that followed my direct response to David stretched across the ceremony space like a taut wire ready to snap. 120 wedding guests sat frozen in their seats, witnessing an unprecedented confrontation that had transformed what should have been a celebration into something resembling a courtroom drama. The afternoon sunlight continued to illuminate the vineyard setting with golden warmth, creating an almost surreal contrast to the tension crackling through the air. Sophia's face cycled through a series of emotions as she processed my words. The initial shock gave way to indignation, then to something approaching desperation as she realized that her carefully constructed wedding fantasy was collapsing in front of everyone who mattered to her. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet, the white garden roses and baby's breath that she had copied from my original design now seeming to mock her lack of originality. Pastor Harrison cleared his throat diplomatically, clearly struggling to navigate a situation for which no seminary training could have prepared him. His decades of experience officiating weddings had never included managing a confrontation between a current bride and the ex-wife wearing an identical dress to the same ceremony location. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow everyone to collect themselves," Pastor Harrison suggested, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone attempting to diffuse a volatile situation without taking sides. Sophia, however, was beyond diplomatic solutions. The facade of gracious bride that she had maintained throughout months of wedding planning finally cracked completely, revealing the calculating personality that had driven her systematic appropriation of my wedding elements. "You are ruining my wedding," Sophia declared, her voice rising to a level that carried clearly across the vineyard setting. "This is harassment, and I want you removed from this property immediately." Her accusation of harassment revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation that had developed. I had received a formal wedding invitation, addressed specifically to me, requesting my presence at the ceremony. My attendance was not uninvited intrusion but response to their explicit request for my participation in their celebration. "Sophia," I replied, maintaining the composed tone that had served me well throughout this confrontation, "you sent me an invitation to this wedding. I am here as your invited guest, wearing attire appropriate for the occasion. If you find my presence uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine why you chose to recreate my wedding in such precise detail." My response highlighted the logical inconsistency in her position. She could not simultaneously invite me to witness her appropriation of my wedding while expecting me to remain passive about the violation she was committing. The invitation itself demonstrated either remarkable obliviousness to the implications of her copying behavior or deliberate provocation designed to humiliate me. David stepped forward, attempting to regain control of a situation that had clearly exceeded his ability to manage. His face showed the strain of someone caught between competing loyalties while lacking the moral authority to resolve the conflict he had helped create. "Elena, I understand you are upset about the similarities, but this is Sophia's day. We planned this wedding together, and these choices reflect what we both wanted for our celebration." David's attempt to reframe the situation as coincidental preferences rather than deliberate copying demonstrated either willful blindness or active participation in the appropriation strategy. His claim that he and Sophia had independently arrived at identical choices to our original wedding defied credibility. "David," I responded, allowing a note of steel to enter my voice for the first time during our exchange, "you shared our wedding album with Sophia for the explicit purpose of recreating our ceremony. You provided her with detailed information about my dress design, our venue selection process, and every other element she has copied. Your participation in this appropriation is documented and undeniable." The assembled guests reacted with audible murmurs as the full scope of the situation became clear to those who had not previously understood the deliberate nature of the copying. Had remained strategically positioned near the ceremony seating throughout the confrontation, stepped forward to provide additional support. Her presence reminded me that I was not alone in this situation, and that my actions had the backing of someone who understood both my motivations and my character. "Elena has conducted herself with remarkable grace throughout this entire situation." Carmen addressed the assembled guests directly. She discovered that her ex-husband's fiancé had systematically copied every element of her wedding, including attempting to replicate her custom-designed dress. Rather than pursuing legal action or private confrontation, she chose to attend as an invited guest and demonstrate the reality of what was being appropriated. Carmen's intervention provided crucial context for guests who might have viewed my presence as inappropriate without understanding the circumstances that had led to this moment. Her explanation reframed my actions as measured response to provocation, rather than unprovoked disruption. Jennifer Walsh, the venue coordinator, approached our group with the professional composure that had made her successful in managing complex wedding logistics. Her experience with difficult situations was evident as she addressed the conflict with diplomatic efficiency. "I believe it would be beneficial for all parties to move this conversation to a private location," Jennifer suggested. "The ceremony space can remain reserved while we work toward a resolution that respects everyone's interests." Her proposal acknowledged that the current confrontation was unsustainable, while offering a path toward conclusion that would minimize additional public spectacle. The suggestion also demonstrated her understanding that this situation required more sophisticated management than simple removal of any party. Sophia, however, was beyond rational negotiation. The collapse of her wedding fantasy had triggered a response that revealed the entitled personality underlying her superficial charm. Her next words would expose the calculating mindset that had driven her appropriation strategy from the beginning. "Fine," Sophia declared, her voice carrying across the ceremony space with harsh clarity. "If Elena wants to make this about her original wedding, then let me tell you what I really think. David told me all about their pathetic little ceremony 5 years ago. He said it was boring, predictable, and exactly what he would expect from someone with no imagination. I improved on every single element because I could do it better." The cruelty of her response stunned the assembled guests into complete silence. Her admission that she had deliberately appropriated my wedding elements while considering herself superior to my original choices revealed a level of malice that exceeded simple poor judgment or coincidental preferences. More damaging to her position was the implication that David had disparaged our original wedding while providing her with details for replication. If their wedding choices were improvements on my supposedly inferior design, why had they copied every element so precisely rather than creating something genuinely better? David's face showed horror as he realized that Sophia's response had destroyed any possibility of maintaining dignity in this situation. Her words had exposed both her calculating appropriation strategy and his betrayal of our original wedding memories through his disparaging comments to his new fiancée. "Sophia, that's not what I said." David protested, but his denial lacked conviction and came too late to undo the damage her revelation had caused. The wedding guests were no longer passive observers, but active witnesses to a character revelation that had profound implications for their understanding of both Sophia and David. Many faces showed expressions of disgust and disappointment as they processed the cruelty underlying what they had assumed was simply poor planning judgment. I felt a profound sense of clarity as Sophia's true nature was revealed to everyone present. Her mask of gracious bride had fallen away completely, exposing someone whose entire approach to relationships was based on competition, appropriation, and calculated manipulation. The woman David was planning to marry had systematically stolen my most precious memories while considering herself superior to my original choices. "Thank you, Sophia," I replied, my voice carrying calm satisfaction rather than anger or hurt. "You have just demonstrated to everyone present exactly who you are and what this marriage represents." Many faces showed expressions of shock and disapproval as they realized that David had actively facilitated his new fiancé's theft of his ex-wife's wedding design. Carmen, who David chose someone who steals other women's creative work while believing herself superior to her victims. I could not have asked for a more perfect illustration of what I escaped when our marriage ended. My response reframed the entire situation in terms that revealed the true victory of the day. I had not come to destroy Sophia's wedding. I had come to reveal the character of someone who would steal another woman's most personal creative work. Her own words had accomplished that revelation more effectively than any action I could have taken. Carmen stepped forward again, recognizing that the confrontation had reached its natural conclusion. "Elena, I think you have made your point beautifully. Perhaps it is time for us to leave these people to their celebration of appropriation and poor character." Her suggestion provided the perfect exit strategy, while delivering a final assessment that would resonate with the assembled guests long after we departed. The characterization of their ceremony as a celebration of appropriation captured exactly what their wedding had become in light of Sophia's revelations. As Carmen and I prepared to leave, something remarkable happened among the wedding guests. Several people rose from their seats and began walking toward the parking area, clearly indicating that they no longer wished to participate in celebrating a union built on theft and deception. Others remained seated but had expressions that suggested their presence was now obligation rather than joy. Jennifer Walsh approached me as we walked toward the parking area, her face showing a mixture of professional admiration and personal sympathy. "Elena, I want you to know that your conduct today has been exemplary. You handled an impossible situation with more grace than I have ever witnessed in 20 years of wedding coordination." Her professional assessment provided valuable validation that my approach had been appropriate and effective. Someone with extensive experience managing difficult wedding situations recognized that I had chosen the most dignified path available for addressing an unprecedented violation. Thank you, Jennifer. I hope this experience will help you identify similar situations in the future and address them before they reach this point, I replied. As Carmen and I drove away from Chateau Saint Michel, I felt a profound sense of completion, rather than the satisfaction of revenge. The confrontation had not been about punishment or humiliation. It had been about reclaiming ownership of my own narrative and demonstrating that some boundaries should never be crossed. The following weeks brought unexpected developments that validated the importance of my decision to confront the situation directly. Several guests who had witnessed the confrontation reached out to express their support and share their own observations about Sofia's behavior during the wedding planning process. Maria Santos, my assistant, reported receiving multiple phone calls from people who had been present at the wedding and wanted to share their reactions to what they had witnessed. Many callers expressed admiration for my composure and dignity throughout the confrontation, while others shared their shock at Sofia's cruel revelations about her motivations. More significantly, I learned through mutual acquaintances that the marriage itself had not proceeded as planned. The ceremony had technically concluded after our departure, but the reception had been notably subdued, as guests struggled to celebrate a union that had been revealed as fundamentally dishonest. Within 6 weeks of their wedding, rumors began circulating that David and Sofia's marriage was experiencing serious difficulties. The confrontation at their ceremony had apparently forced them to examine the foundation of their relationship, which proved to be as unstable as their wedding planning choices had suggested. 3 months later, Carmen called with news that David had filed for divorce from Sofia, citing irreconcilable differences and fundamental incompatibility. The marriage that had been built on appropriating my memories had collapsed when forced to create its own authentic foundation. The news of their divorce brought no satisfaction or vindication, only a sense of profound sadness for the waste of time, energy, and emotion that their entire relationship represented. David had traded a genuine partnership for a relationship with someone whose entire identity was built on taking what belonged to others. The experience transformed my understanding of personal boundaries and the importance of protecting one's most precious memories from those who would diminish or appropriate them. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful response to violation is not anger or retaliation, but the dignified assertion of truth in a public forum where character can be revealed and judged by others. My decision to attend their wedding wearing my original dress had been vindicated, not through the destruction of their celebration, but through the revelation of their true characters to everyone who mattered in their social circle. The confrontation had provided them with an opportunity to demonstrate grace under pressure, and they had failed that test completely. 6 months after their wedding, I received an unexpected phone call from David, who wanted to apologize for his role in the appropriation of our wedding memories. His voice carried genuine remorse, as he acknowledged that sharing our wedding details with Sofia had been a profound betrayal of our shared history. "Elena, I realize now that what Sofia and I did was unforgivable," David said during our brief conversation. "You had every right to be angry, and you handled the situation with more class than either of us deserved. I am deeply sorry for my part in hurting you." His apology provided closure to a chapter of my life that had been reopened by their inappropriate choices. While I accepted his apology, I also made clear that the experience had demonstrated fundamental differences in our approaches to relationships and personal integrity that validated our original decision to divorce. The confrontation at Chateau Saint Michel became a defining moment in my personal development, marking the transition from someone who avoided conflict to someone willing to defend her most precious memories against those who would appropriate them. The experience taught me that dignity and strength often require the courage to stand up publicly for principles that matter, even when the personal cost seems overwhelming. Today, 2 years after that remarkable afternoon in the vineyard, I continue working as a financial consultant with renewed confidence in my ability to handle complex challenges with grace and strategic thinking. The skills I demonstrated during the wedding confrontation have served me well in professional situations requiring delicate navigation of competing interests and strong advocacy for client needs. Most importantly, the experience taught me that authentic strength comes not from avoiding difficult situations, but from meeting them with preparation, dignity, and unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. Sometimes, the most powerful response to those who would diminish us is simply showing up as our authentic selves and allowing the truth to speak for itself. The wedding dress that sparked this entire confrontation now hangs in my closet as a reminder of both the beautiful memories it represents and the strength I discovered when those memories were threatened. It serves as evidence that some things are worth fighting for, and that the most effective battles are often won through the power of truth rather than the force of anger. 2 years after the confrontation at Chateau Saint-Michel, the ripple effects of that extraordinary afternoon continued to shape my life in ways I had never anticipated. The woman who had walked into that vineyard wearing her original wedding dress had emerged as someone fundamentally transformed by the experience of defending her most precious memories against those who would appropriate them without consequence. The immediate aftermath of the wedding confrontation had required careful navigation of the social and professional implications that followed such a public demonstration of personal boundaries. Word of the incident had spread throughout Seattle's interconnected professional networks, where David and I maintained numerous mutual contacts through our respective careers in pharmaceutical sales and financial consulting. Initial reactions had varied considerably based on individual perspectives regarding appropriate responses to personal violation. Some colleagues expressed concern that my actions had been too confrontational for a situation that might have been resolved through private communication. Others praised my courage in addressing a fundamental breach of respect that demanded direct response rather than diplomatic accommodation. The diversity of reactions taught me valuable lessons about the complexity of public opinion when personal conflicts intersect with professional reputations. I discovered that my approach to the situation revealed as much about the character and values of those responding as it did about my own decision-making process during challenging circumstances. Dr. Margaret Chen, a clinical psychologist who specialized in relationship dynamics and personal boundary development, reached out 3 months after the wedding incident to request a consultation regarding my experience. Dr. Chen was researching patterns of identity appropriation in competitive social environments, and believed my situation provided valuable insights into effective responses to psychological manipulation. During our initial consultation, Dr. Chen explained that identity appropriation represented a sophisticated form of psychological aggression that targeted victims' sense of personal ownership over their creative work, life experiences, and individual achievements. The behavior typically emerged from personality disorders characterized by inadequate individual identity development and compulsive comparison with others, perceived as more successful or accomplished. Elena, your response to this situation demonstrates remarkable psychological resilience and strategic thinking, Dr. Chen observed during our conversation. Most victims of identity appropriation experience self-doubt, second-guessing their perceptions, and difficulty determining appropriate responses to such subtle forms of aggression. Your ability to recognize the violation clearly and respond with measured assertiveness suggests exceptional emotional intelligence. Dr. Chen's analysis provided professional validation for my decision-making process, while offering deeper understanding of the psychological dynamics that had driven Sophia's behavior. The consultation helped me recognize that my experience represented a broader pattern of interpersonal manipulation that affected numerous individuals who lacked frameworks for understanding and addressing such violations. This realization inspired me to develop presentation materials about boundary protection and strategic response to personal violation that could benefit other professionals facing similar challenges. My background in financial consulting provided analytical skills that translated effectively to examining interpersonal dynamics and developing systematic approaches to conflict resolution. 6 months after the wedding incident, I received an invitation to speak at the Seattle Women's Professional Network regarding my experience with identity appropriation and effective boundary protection strategies. The organization had learned about my situation through members who had witnessed the confrontation or heard accounts from attendees. The speaking engagement represented my first opportunity to transform a personal challenge into professional expertise that could benefit others facing similar violations. Preparing for the presentation required careful analysis of the decision-making process that had led to my successful resolution of the conflict with Sophia and David. The presentation, titled Protecting Your Professional Identity: Strategic Responses to Appropriation and Manipulation, attracted an audience of 140 professional women representing diverse industries and career levels. The response exceeded all expectations, with numerous attendees requesting additional resources and follow-up consultations regarding their own experiences with workplace and personal boundary violations. During the question and answer session following my presentation, several audience members shared their own experiences with identity appropriation in professional settings. The stories revealed a pattern of sophisticated manipulation tactics that targeted successful women's achievements, creative work, and personal branding strategies. One marketing executive described a colleague who had systematically copied her client presentation formats, design aesthetics, and strategic frameworks, while positioning herself as the originator of these approaches during interactions with senior management. Another attorney shared her experience with a partner who had appropriated her research methodologies and case development strategies, while undermining her professional reputation through subtle character assassination. The commonality among these experiences highlighted the need for comprehensive education regarding recognition and response to identity appropriation in professional environments. Many talented women were experiencing sophisticated forms of workplace aggression without understanding the systematic nature of the behavior or developing effective countermeasures. This recognition led to the development of my consulting practice, specializing in professional boundary protection and strategic response to workplace manipulation. The combination of my financial analysis background and personal experience with identity appropriation created a unique expertise that addressed both the analytical and emotional aspects of these challenging situations. Within 1 year of launching my specialized consulting services, my client base had expanded to include executives from major corporations, entrepreneurs developing personal brands, and creative professionals protecting intellectual property from appropriation. The demand for expertise in this area exceeded my initial projections and required expansion of my practice to accommodate the volume of requests. The success of my consulting work attracted attention from business publications and professional development organizations seeking expert commentary on workplace dynamics and boundary protection strategies. Articles featuring my analysis of identity appropriation appeared in Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Entrepreneur magazine, establishing my reputation as a thought leader in this emerging field. The professional recognition that emerged from my experience with Sophia and David validated my decision to confront their appropriation directly rather than pursuing private resolution or legal remediation. The public nature of my response had created opportunities for broader impact that would have been impossible through conventional approaches to conflict resolution. During this period of professional expansion, I also experienced significant personal growth that extended beyond my career development. The confidence I had gained through successfully defending my boundaries against sophisticated manipulation had transformed my approach to all relationships, both professional and personal. I began dating again for the first time since my divorce from David, approaching new relationships with clear understanding of my values, boundaries, and expectations for respectful treatment. The experience with Sophia had taught me to recognize early warning signs of manipulative behavior and respond appropriately before violations became entrenched patterns. My relationship with Carmen deepened as she witnessed my transformation from someone who avoided confrontation to someone who addressed challenges with strategic confidence. She frequently commented on the positive changes in my communication style, decision-making process, and overall approach to personal empowerment. "Elena, you have become someone who commands respect simply through your presence," Carmen observed during one of our regular sister conversations. "The way you handled Sophia and David showed everyone in your social circle that you will not tolerate disrespect or manipulation. That reputation has changed how people interact with you across all areas of your life." Carmen's observation proved accurate, as I noticed improvements in my professional negotiations, client relationships, and personal interactions. The reputation for strategic thinking and principled boundary protection that had emerged from the wedding confrontation created advantages in numerous situations requiring strong advocacy or conflict resolution. 18 months after the wedding incident, I received unexpected contact from Jennifer Walsh, the venue coordinator at Chateau Ste. Michelle, who requested a consultation regarding policy development for managing similar situations in the future. The wedding industry had begun recognizing identity appropriation as a significant concern requiring proactive prevention strategies. "Elena, your situation opened our eyes to dynamics we had never considered during wedding planning," Jennifer explained during our consultation. "We have since identified several other cases, where brides were systematically copying elements from previous weddings held at our venue. Your approach to addressing this violation has become our model for handling these situations professionally. Jennifer's request led to development of comprehensive guidelines for wedding venues, seeking to prevent identity appropriation while protecting the creative work and emotional investments of previous clients. The consulting work expanded to include other high-end venues throughout the Pacific Northwest region where similar concerns had emerged. The wedding industry consultation work provided additional validation that my experience represented a broader pattern requiring systematic attention rather than isolated incident management. The protocols I developed for venue coordinators emphasized early detection of copying behavior, diplomatic intervention during planning processes, and professional support for victims of appropriation. 2 years after the confrontation, I received a letter from an unexpected source that provided profound closure to the entire experience. Madeline Forrester, the designer who had created my original wedding dress, wrote to inform me that my handling of the appropriation attempt had inspired her to develop stronger intellectual property protection measures for her custom design work. Elena, watching you defend your dress design with such dignity and effectiveness motivated me to establish clearer boundaries regarding replication of my work. Madeline wrote, "Your courage in confronting this violation publicly has helped protect not only your own creative investment, but also the artistic integrity of custom design work more broadly." Kunst auf Ton. Madeline's letter included information about new contract provisions she had implemented requiring explicit written consent before any design elements could be shared with other clients or reproduced for different occasions. The policy changes would prevent future situations where brides could obtain detailed design information for unauthorized replication purposes. The knowledge that my experience had contributed to broader protections for creative professionals provided deep satisfaction that extended beyond personal vindication. The confrontation at Chateau St. Michel had created positive changes that would benefit other women facing similar violations in the future. As I reflected on the 2-year journey from discovery of Sophia's appropriation to establishment of my consulting practice and industry expertise, the transformation in my personal and professional life seemed almost miraculous. The woman who had received that wedding invitation with shock and hurt had evolved into someone whose experience provided valuable guidance for others facing comparable challenges. The wedding dress that had been the centerpiece of the entire confrontation continued to hang in my closet as a powerful reminder of both beautiful memories and personal strength discovered during crisis. The gown represented not only my original marriage to David, but also my willingness to defend what mattered most when others attempted to diminish or appropriate it. Looking toward the future, I recognized that the experience with Sophia and David had prepared me for challenges and opportunities that would require the same strategic thinking, principled boundary protection, and confident communication that had served me well during the wedding confrontation. The skills developed through that extraordinary afternoon in the vineyard had become permanent additions to my personal and professional capabilities. The consulting practice continued expanding as demand for expertise in identity appropriation and boundary protection grew throughout professional communities. Speaking engagements, publication opportunities, and client referrals created a sustainable business model built on transforming personal challenge into professional expertise that benefited others. Most importantly, the experience had taught me that authentic strength emerges not from avoiding difficult situations, but from meeting them with preparation, dignity, and unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. The confrontation at Chateau St. Michel had become a defining moment that demonstrated the power of strategic action when personal boundaries are violated by those who believe they can appropriate others' lives without consequence. The legacy of that afternoon continued to inspire my approach to all subsequent challenges, reminding me that sometimes the most effective response to those who would diminish us is simply showing up as our authentic selves and allowing truth to reveal character in its full complexity. 3 years after the confrontation at Chateau St. Michel, an unexpected phone call would reveal that the impact of my decision to defend my wedding memories extended far beyond what I had initially understood. The caller identified herself as Victoria Blackwell, and her voice carried a professional confidence that immediately commanded attention during our conversation. "Ms. Rodriguez, I am calling regarding your experience with my former sister-in-law, Sophia Blackwell," Victoria began, her tone conveying both formality and underlying tension. I represent a group of women who have been affected by Sophia's pattern of identity appropriation, and we believe your successful response to her behavior provides a valuable framework for addressing similar violations. Victoria's call introduced me to a network of professional women who had encountered Sophia in various contexts throughout her career and personal relationships. Each woman had experienced systematic copying of their work, personal style, or creative projects, but none had possessed sufficient evidence or strategic approach to confront the behavior effectively. The scope of Sophia's appropriation activities extended far beyond her copying of my wedding details. Victoria shared documentation of a 10-year pattern of intellectual property theft, creative work appropriation, and strategic identity copying that had affected women across multiple industries and geographic locations. According to Victoria's research, Sophia had developed sophisticated methods for identifying successful women in her professional and social circles, studying their achievements in detail, and systematically appropriating their most valuable creative work or personal branding elements. The behavior represented calculated intellectual property theft rather than coincidental similarity or unconscious imitation. Sophia's approach follows a consistent pattern, Victoria explained during our initial consultation. She identifies women whose success or creativity she admires, develops access to their work through professional or social connections, studies their methods intensively, and then presents their ideas as her own original concepts while positioning herself as superior to the original creators. Victoria's documentation included evidence from Sophia's previous employment at a Portland marketing firm, where she had appropriated campaign concepts developed by female colleagues and presented them to clients as her original strategic work. The behavior had resulted in several women losing promotion opportunities and professional recognition that should have accompanied their creative contributions. Similar patterns had emerged during Sophia's graduate school program, where she had systematically copied research methodologies and analytical frameworks developed by female classmates while undermining their academic reputations through strategic character assassination. The combination of appropriation and reputation destruction had enabled Sophia to advance professionally while damaging the careers of her victims. Most disturbing was evidence that Sophia had applied these same tactics in personal relationships, systematically copying the interests, style choices, and social connections of women she perceived as threats or competitors. The wedding appropriation that had affected me represented the culmination of this pattern, rather than an isolated incident of poor judgment. Your response to Sophia's appropriation of your wedding represents the first time someone has successfully confronted her behavior publicly and created consequences for her actions, Victoria continued. The other women in our network have struggled to address her violations effectively because the behavior is sophisticated and difficult to prove without extensive documentation. Victoria's call revealed that my confrontation at the wedding venue had inspired other women to examine their own experiences with Sophia more carefully and recognize patterns they had previously dismissed as coincidence or professional competition. The public nature of my response had provided a framework for understanding and addressing identity appropriation that had been missing from their previous attempts to resolve these conflicts. The network Victoria represented included Dr. Amanda Sterling, a clinical research scientist whose pharmaceutical analysis methods had been appropriated by Sophia during their overlapping employment at a biotechnology company. Dr. Sterling had lost a significant promotion opportunity when Sophia presented modified versions of her research protocols as original methodologies during a competitive review process. Another member was Isabella Martinez, an interior designer whose signature aesthetic approach had been systematically copied by Sophia after she gained access to Isabella's portfolio through a mutual client relationship. Sophia had launched her own design consulting practice using Isabella's techniques while underbidding her projects and damaging her professional reputation through strategic misinformation campaigns. The most recent victim was Sarah Chen, a digital marketing specialist whose innovative social media strategies had been appropriated by Sophia after they worked together on a collaborative project. Sarah had discovered the theft when clients began requesting Sophia's services specifically to access techniques that Sarah had developed through years of experimentation and refinement. Each woman's experience revealed the same methodical approach to appropriation that I had encountered during Sophia's wedding planning process. The systematic nature of the behavior suggested extensive planning and calculated execution rather than spontaneous poor judgment or ethical lapses. Victoria proposed coordinating our individual experiences into a comprehensive legal case that would address the pattern of intellectual property theft and professional damage that Sophia's behavior had created across multiple industries. The combined evidence would provide sufficient documentation to pursue both civil remedies and professional sanctions that could prevent future violations. Elena, your public confrontation created the catalyst we needed to move from individual frustration to collective action, Victoria explained. Your willingness to defend your boundaries publicly demonstrated that Sophia's behavior could be challenged effectively and that victims did not need to accept these violations as inevitable professional hazards. The legal strategy Victoria proposed involved documenting the systematic nature of Sophia's appropriation activities, establishing the financial and professional damages experienced by each victim, and pursuing remedies that would both compensate for past harm and prevent future violations. The approach required coordination among multiple legal jurisdictions and professional regulatory bodies. My role in the collective legal action would involve providing detailed testimony regarding the wedding appropriation incident, sharing documentation of Sophia's copying behavior, and demonstrating the strategic approach I had developed for confronting identity appropriation effectively. The experience I had gained through my subsequent consulting practice provided valuable expertise regarding prevention and response strategies. The legal preparation process required extensive collaboration with the other women in Victoria's network, sharing evidence, and developing a comprehensive understanding of Sophia's methodical approach to appropriation. The documentation revealed a level of calculation and strategic planning that exceeded anything I had previously understood about her behavior. Dr. Sterling's research files included email communications where Sophia had requested access to proprietary methodologies under the pretense of collaborative research, only to present modified versions of these techniques as her original innovations during subsequent professional presentations. The communications provided clear evidence of deliberate deception rather than coincidental similarity. Isabella's portfolio documentation showed systematic copying of her design aesthetics, including specific color palettes, furniture arrangements, and decorative approaches that Sophia had recreated precisely for her own clients, while claiming superior design expertise. The visual evidence was undeniable and professionally documented through project photographs and client testimonials. Sarah's digital marketing case included extensive documentation of social media strategies, engagement techniques, and content development approaches that Sophia had appropriated after gaining access through their collaborative project. The evidence included time-stamped communications that established clear timelines for the appropriation process. Combined with my documentation of the wedding copying incident, the collective evidence established a pattern of behavior that extended over more than a decade and affected women across multiple professional sectors. The systematic nature of the appropriation suggested extensive planning and sophisticated execution that required legal intervention to prevent continuation. The legal proceedings that followed consumed 8 months of intensive preparation, deposition processes, and evidence compilation. Sophia's legal team attempted to dismiss the allegations as professional competition and coincidental similarity, but the extensive documentation made their defense strategies ineffective. The breakthrough in our legal case came when Victoria's investigative team discovered that Sophia had maintained detailed files documenting her appropriation activities, including research on her targets, analysis of their successful techniques, and strategic plans for implementing their methods as her own innovations. The files provided direct evidence of premeditation and systematic planning that eliminated any possibility of claiming coincidental similarity. Sophia's own documentation revealed the calculated nature of her approach to identity appropriation. She had developed detailed profiles of successful women in her professional and social circles, analyzing their achievements, studying their methods, and developing strategic plans for appropriating their most valuable creative work. The files included specific references to my wedding planning process, with detailed notes about elements she planned to copy and improvements she believed she could implement. Her documentation revealed that the appropriation had been planned from the early stages of her relationship with David, suggesting that access to my wedding memories had been a strategic objective rather than coincidental discovery. Most damaging to Sophia's position were communications with David, where she explicitly discussed her intention to recreate our wedding, while demonstrating superior execution of the same concepts. The emails provided clear evidence that David had been an active participant in the appropriation strategy, rather than an unknowing enabler of coincidental similarities. The legal resolution included financial settlements that compensated each victim for professional damages, lost opportunities, and the costs associated with protecting their intellectual property from future appropriation. More importantly, the case established legal precedents for addressing identity appropriation in professional environments, and created frameworks for prevention and response that would benefit other victims. Sophia was required to publicly acknowledge the appropriation activities, provide written apologies to each victim, and agree to permanent restrictions on her ability to access certain types of professional information or collaborative opportunities. The sanctions would prevent future appropriation while creating public awareness of the behavior patterns we had documented. The professional sanctions imposed by relevant industry organizations prohibited Sophia from practicing in fields where she had demonstrated systematic appropriation behavior. The restrictions would prevent her from accessing opportunities to continue these violations while protecting other professionals from similar experiences. The legal victory provided profound validation for my decision to confront Sophia's appropriation publicly, rather than pursuing private resolution or accepting the violation as inevitable. The strategic approach I had developed during the wedding confrontation had evolved into comprehensive legal action that created lasting protections for other women facing similar challenges. Victoria's leadership throughout the legal process demonstrated the power of collective action when individual violations are recognized as components of systematic patterns requiring coordinated response. Her ability to identify and organize other victims had transformed individual frustrations into comprehensive legal action that achieved meaningful consequences. The conclusion of the legal proceedings coincided with significant expansion of my consulting practice, as demand for expertise in identity appropriation prevention and response continued growing throughout professional communities. The legal victory had established my reputation as a leading expert in strategic boundary protection and intellectual property defense. The network of women who had collaborated on the legal case evolved into an ongoing professional alliance, focused on supporting other victims of identity appropriation and developing prevention strategies for professional organizations. The relationships formed during our shared legal experience created lasting partnerships that continued benefiting our individual careers and collective advocacy efforts. As I reflected on the journey from receiving Sophia's wedding invitation to achieving comprehensive legal resolution of her appropriation activities, the transformation in my personal and professional life seemed extraordinary. The woman who had been shocked by a copied wedding invitation had evolved into someone whose experience provided protection and advocacy for other victims of sophisticated manipulation. The wedding dress that had sparked this remarkable sequence of events continued to represent both beautiful memories and personal strength discovered through crisis. The gown had become a symbol of the importance of defending what matters most when others attempt to diminish or appropriate our most precious experiences and creative work. The legacy of standing up to Sophia's appropriation had extended far beyond personal vindication to create lasting positive change for women facing similar violations throughout multiple professional sectors. The courage required for that initial confrontation had evolved into comprehensive expertise that continued providing protection and empowerment for others who needed strategic support during challenging circumstances. 4 years after the confrontation at Chateau Saint Michel, the legal victory against Sophia Blackwell had catalyzed developments that extended far beyond our original coalition of affected women. The precedent established through our collective legal action had attracted international attention from academic researchers, legal scholars, and professional organizations seeking to understand and address identity appropriation as a systematic form of workplace and personal violation. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, a professor of organizational psychology at Stanford University, contacted me to discuss incorporating our case study into her research on professional identity theft and its impact on women's career advancement. Dr. Morrison's preliminary research had identified identity appropriation as a significant but under-recognized barrier to women's professional success, particularly in competitive industries where creative work and innovative thinking were highly valued. The Stanford research project required extensive documentation of our legal proceedings, detailed analysis of the evidence we had compiled, and comprehensive interviews with each woman who had participated in the collective action against Sophia. Dr. Morrison's methodology emphasized the systematic nature of identity appropriation and its disproportionate impact on women who had achieved professional recognition through original thinking and creative problem-solving. Elena, your case represents a watershed moment in understanding how identity appropriation functions as a sophisticated form of professional sabotage, Dr. Morrison explained during our initial research consultation. The documentation you and your colleagues compiled provides unprecedented insight into the methodical nature of this behavior and the cumulative damage it creates across multiple victims and professional sectors. The Stanford research revealed that identity appropriation represented a form of professional aggression that specifically targeted women whose success threatened established hierarchies or challenged traditional approaches to industry practices. The behavior served dual purposes of advancing the appropriator's career while simultaneously undermining the original creator's professional reputation and advancement opportunities. Dr. Morrison's analysis of our legal case identified key factors that had enabled our successful resolution of Sophia's appropriation activities. The combination of detailed documentation, strategic coordination among victims, and public confrontation that established clear consequences had created a framework that other victims could adapt to their specific circumstances. The research findings were published in the Harvard Business Review under the title Identity Appropriation in Professional Environments: Recognition, Documentation, and Strategic Response. The article featured our legal case as the primary example of effective collective action against systematic appropriation, establishing my reputation as a leading expert in strategic boundary protection and intellectual property defense. The publication of Dr. Morrison's research triggered an unexpected wave of international inquiries from women who had experienced similar violations but lacked frameworks for understanding or addressing the behavior they had encountered. The volume of contact requests exceeded my consulting practice's capacity and required development of comprehensive resources that could serve victims across multiple countries and professional sectors. Working with Victoria Blackwell and the other women from our original coalition, I established the International Identity Protection Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing education, resources, and advocacy support for victims of identity appropriation and related forms of professional violation. The Institute's mission focused on prevention education, victim support services, and policy development that would create systemic protections against these sophisticated forms of workplace aggression. The Institute's initial programs included online educational resources that helped professionals recognize early warning signs of identity appropriation, strategic response frameworks that victims could adapt to their specific circumstances, and legal referral networks that connected victims with attorneys experienced in intellectual property and professional harassment cases. The comprehensive approach addressed both immediate victim needs and long-term prevention strategies. Within 18 months of its establishment, the International Identity Protection Institute had served more than 3,000 women across 47 countries who had experienced various forms of identity appropriation in professional, academic, and personal contexts. The global scope of the problem exceeded our initial projections and demonstrated the urgent need for systematic education and support services. The Institute's case documentation revealed consistent patterns of behavior that transcended cultural and professional boundaries. Identity appropriators across different countries and industries employed remarkably similar techniques for identifying targets, gaining access to creative work, and positioning themselves as superior to the original creators while appropriating their most valuable contributions. Dr. Chen Wei, a research psychologist at the University of Hong Kong, collaborated with our institute to develop the first comprehensive diagnostic criteria for identifying identity appropriation behavior in professional environments. Dr. Chen's work established clear distinctions between appropriate professional learning, legitimate collaboration, and systematic appropriation that violated intellectual property and professional ethics standards. The diagnostic criteria developed through our collaboration provided essential tools for human resources professionals, legal advisors, and organizational leaders who needed objective frameworks for evaluating allegations of identity appropriation. The standardized assessment process eliminated subjective interpretation and established clear benchmarks for determining when behavior constituted actionable violation. The international expansion of our advocacy work attracted attention from corporate executives who recognized identity appropriation as a significant risk factor for talent retention and organizational culture. Several Fortune 500 companies requested consultation services to develop prevention policies and response protocols that would protect their employees from these sophisticated forms of professional violation. Microsoft Corporation became the first major technology company to implement comprehensive identity protection policies based on our institute's recommendations. The Microsoft initiative included mandatory training for all managers regarding recognition and prevention of identity appropriation, clear reporting procedures for employees who experienced these violations, and standardized investigation protocols that ensured consistent and effective resolution. The success of Microsoft's identity protection program inspired adoption of similar policies across the technology sector, with companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook implementing customized versions of our prevention and response frameworks. The corporate adoption of our institute's recommendations created industry-wide cultural changes that significantly reduced the incidence of identity appropriation in professional environments. The expanding influence of our advocacy work culminated in an invitation to address the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women regarding identity appropriation as a barrier to women's professional advancement and economic empowerment. The speaking opportunity represented recognition of our institute's work as addressing fundamental issues of gender equality and professional justice. Preparing for the United Nations presentation required comprehensive analysis of how identity appropriation affected women's economic opportunities across different cultural and professional contexts. The research revealed that systematic appropriation of women's creative work represented a significant factor in persistent gender-based wage gaps and leadership representation disparities. The United Nations presentation, titled Protecting Women's Intellectual Contributions, Addressing Identity Appropriation as Economic Violence, established identity appropriation as a recognized form of economic discrimination that required systematic intervention through policy development, legal protection, and cultural change initiatives. The international recognition achieved through the United Nations presentation attracted collaboration opportunities with government agencies, academic institutions, and professional organizations seeking to develop comprehensive strategies for addressing identity appropriation in their respective jurisdictions. The Institute's expertise became essential for organizations committed to creating equitable professional environments. During this period of international expansion and recognition, I experienced profound personal growth that extended beyond my professional achievements. The confidence and strategic thinking skills that had emerged through confronting Sophia's appropriation had evolved into leadership capabilities that enabled me to guide complex international initiatives and collaborative partnerships. My relationship with Carmen deepened as she witnessed my transformation from someone seeking justice for personal violation to someone leading global advocacy efforts that protected thousands of women from similar experiences. Her unwavering support throughout this journey had provided essential stability during the most challenging phases of building institutional change. Elena, watching your evolution from that day you discovered Sophia's copying has been extraordinary. Carmen reflected during one of our regular conversations. You have transformed personal pain into global protection for women who might never have found their voices without the framework you created. Carmen's observation captured the fundamental principle that had guided my work since the original confrontation at Chateau Saint-Michel. Individual experiences of violation, when addressed with strategic thinking and principled action, could create positive change that extended far beyond personal resolution to benefit countless others facing similar challenges. The wedding dress that had been the catalyst for this remarkable journey continued to hang in my closet, as a tangible reminder of both beautiful memories and the strength discovered through defending what mattered most. The gown represented the moment when I had chosen strategic action over passive acceptance of violation, a decision that had ultimately created protection and empowerment for thousands of women worldwide. 5 years after receiving Sophia's wedding invitation, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had emerged from that initial moment of shock and hurt. The woman who had been devastated by the discovery of systematic copying had evolved into someone whose experience provided hope and practical solutions for victims of sophisticated manipulation across multiple countries and professional sectors. The International Identity Protection Institute had become a permanent fixture in the global landscape of women's advocacy organizations, with sustainable funding, expanding program offerings, and growing influence in policy development across multiple industries and governmental jurisdictions. The Institute's work continued creating systemic changes that would protect future generations of women from the violations we had experienced. The legacy of standing up to Sophia's appropriation had transcended personal vindication to create lasting institutional change that would benefit women facing similar challenges for decades to come. The courage required for that initial confrontation at the wedding venue had evolved into comprehensive advocacy that addressed fundamental issues of professional equity and intellectual property protection. Looking toward the future, I recognized that the skills and experience gained through this remarkable journey had prepared me for continued leadership in addressing complex challenges requiring strategic thinking, principled action, and unwavering commitment to protecting what matters most. The transformation that began with defending a wedding dress had become a lifelong mission to ensure that women's creative contributions would be recognized, protected, and valued appropriately. The motivational principle that had guided every phase of this journey remained constant. Authentic strength emerges not from avoiding difficult situations, but from meeting them with preparation, dignity, and strategic action that creates positive change extending beyond individual circumstances. The confrontation at Chateau Saint Michel had demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful response to violation is transforming personal experience into advocacy that protects others from similar harm. 6 years after the confrontation at Chateau Saint Michel, the International Identity Protection Institute, had established operations across 12 countries and maintained active partnerships with more than 80 professional organizations dedicated to protecting intellectual property and promoting ethical workplace practices. The Institute's comprehensive approach to prevention education, victim advocacy, and policy development had created measurable improvements in professional environments, where women's creative contributions were historically undervalued or systematically appropriated. The success of our advocacy initiatives had attracted attention from unexpected quarters, including corporations seeking to address cultural issues that affected innovation, productivity, and employee retention. The business case for preventing identity appropriation had become compelling, as organizations recognized the financial costs associated with losing talented women whose creative work was being systematically undermined by colleagues who appropriated their contributions without attribution or compensation. Deloitte Consulting engaged our institute to conduct a comprehensive analysis of identity appropriation's impact on organizational performance across multiple industry sectors. The research project required examining productivity metrics, employee satisfaction surveys, and retention data from companies that had implemented our prevention protocols, compared to organizations that maintained traditional approaches to intellectual property protection and collaborative work environments. The Deloitte study revealed remarkable correlations between identity protection policies and improved business outcomes. Organizations that had implemented comprehensive prevention programs experienced 23% higher retention rates among high-performing women employees, 31% increases in patent applications and creative project completions, and significant improvements in team collaboration metrics and overall workplace satisfaction scores. The financial implications of these findings exceeded our initial projections regarding the business value of protecting women's intellectual contributions. Companies that failed to address identity appropriation were experiencing substantial costs through lost productivity, reduced innovation capacity, and the expense of replacing talented employees who left organizations where their creative work was not adequately protected or appropriately attributed. The Deloitte research findings were published in the Harvard Business Review under the title, "The Innovation Cost of Identity Appropriation: How Protecting Women's Intellectual Contributions Drives Business Performance." The article established identity protection as a critical component of organizational strategy rather than simply a human resources concern or legal compliance issue. The publication of the Harvard Business Review article triggered an unprecedented wave of corporate consulting requests, as executives recognized identity appropriation as a significant risk factor for organizational competitiveness and innovation capacity. The Institute's consulting services expanded to include comprehensive organizational assessments, policy development initiatives, and implementation support for companies seeking to create more equitable and productive work environments. During this period of rapid organizational growth and expanding influence, I received an unexpected communication that would challenge my understanding of redemption, personal growth, and the possibility of genuine transformation in individuals who had previously demonstrated systematic patterns of harmful behavior. The communication arrived through the Institute's general contact system rather than my personal channels, ensuring that it would be reviewed by our intake specialists before reaching my attention. The message was from David Thornton, my former husband, requesting a private consultation regarding identity appropriation issues he was experiencing in his current professional environment. David's message explained that he had been experiencing systematic appropriation of his pharmaceutical sales strategies and client relationship approaches by a colleague who had gained access to his work through their shared employment at a biotechnology company. The colleague was presenting David's innovative techniques as original contributions while undermining his professional reputation through strategic misinformation campaigns that threatened his career advancement and financial stability. The irony of David seeking assistance from the institute I had established in response to his participation in Sophia's appropriation of my wedding memories was not lost on me. This situation presented complex questions regarding professional ethics, personal boundaries, and the possibility of providing objective assistance to someone whose previous actions had directly contributed to the violations that had inspired my advocacy work. After consultation with the Institute's advisory board and careful consideration of the ethical implications, I agreed to meet with David for an initial assessment of his situation. The decision was based on our organization's commitment to serving all victims of identity appropriation, regardless of their previous actions or personal relationships with Institute staff members. The meeting with David took place at the Institute's Seattle offices, providing a professional environment that maintained appropriate boundaries while allowing for comprehensive discussion of his circumstances. David's appearance reflected the stress and uncertainty that characterized most victims of identity appropriation, demonstrating the psychological impact that these violations created regardless of the victim's previous behavior or personal history. David's account of his current situation revealed sophisticated appropriation tactics that closely resembled the strategies Sophia had employed against our coalition of victims. His colleague had systematically studied David's client interaction techniques, copied his presentation formats and strategic frameworks, and positioned himself as superior to David while presenting modified versions of David's innovations as original contributions. The documentation David provided included email communications, client feedback reports, and performance evaluations that demonstrated clear patterns of appropriation and reputation undermining that met our institute's diagnostic criteria for systematic identity theft. The evidence suggested that David was experiencing legitimate professional violation that warranted advocacy support regardless of his previous actions. During our consultation, David acknowledged the role he had played in enabling Sophia's appropriation of my wedding memories and expressed genuine remorse for his participation in behavior that had caused significant personal and professional harm. His apology was more comprehensive and thoughtful than his previous communications, suggesting genuine understanding of the impact his actions had created. Elena, I realize that seeking help from you represents extraordinary irony given my role in the situation that inspired your advocacy work, David stated during our meeting. I understand if you choose not to assist me, but I wanted you to know that experiencing identity appropriation myself has given me profound appreciation for the violation you endured and the courage you demonstrated in confronting it. David's reflection on his current experience provided valuable insights into how identity appropriation affected victims, regardless of their previous behavior or personal characteristics. The psychological impact of having one's creative work systematically stolen and reputation deliberately undermined created similar stress and professional uncertainty across different victim populations. After careful deliberation, I decided to provide David with strategic guidance regarding documentation of his colleagues' appropriation activities and referral to legal resources that could address his specific circumstances. The decision was based on our institute's mission to serve all victims of identity appropriation, while maintaining professional boundaries that protected my personal well-being and organizational credibility. The assistance provided to David proved effective in addressing his colleagues' appropriation behavior and protecting his professional reputation from further damage. The strategic approach we had developed through our advocacy work translated effectively to his specific circumstances and demonstrated the universal applicability of our prevention and response frameworks. David's successful resolution of his identity appropriation challenges led to an unexpected development that would further expand the Institute's impact and influence. His experience as both a previous enabler of appropriation behavior and a subsequent victim provided unique insights into the psychological dynamics that motivated these violations and the most effective intervention strategies. David requested permission to share his experience through the Institute's educational programs as a case study, demonstrating how individuals who had previously participated in identity appropriation could recognize the harm they had contributed to and develop more ethical approaches to professional collaboration and intellectual property respect. The proposal required careful consideration of the potential benefits and risks associated with incorporating David's perspective into our advocacy work. The advisory board ultimately approved his participation based on the educational value of demonstrating personal transformation and the importance of reaching audiences who might be engaging in appropriation behavior without recognizing the harm they were creating. David's presentations at corporate training programs proved remarkably effective in helping participants recognize subtle forms of appropriation behavior they might be engaging in unconsciously. His ability to describe the enabler's perspective while acknowledging the victim's experience provided comprehensive understanding that enhanced the impact of our prevention education initiatives. The success of David's educational contributions led to development of specialized training programs targeting individuals who had previously engaged in or enabled identity appropriation behavior. The programs emphasized recognition of harm, development of ethical alternatives, and practical strategies for supporting colleagues whose creative work deserved protection and appropriate attribution. The expansion of our educational offerings to include transformation and redemption narratives attracted attention from criminal justice reform organizations seeking to address white-collar crimes and professional misconduct through restorative approaches rather than purely punitive measures. The Institute's work demonstrated that individuals who had engaged in harmful behavior could become effective advocates for preventing similar violations. Within 2 years of beginning his collaboration with the Institute, David had become one of our most effective speakers for corporate audiences seeking to understand and prevent identity appropriation in professional environments. His presentations consistently received the highest evaluation scores from participants, who appreciated his honest acknowledgement of previous mistakes and practical guidance for avoiding similar violations. The transformation in David's understanding and behavior provided powerful evidence that individuals who had engaged in identity appropriation could develop genuine appreciation for the harm they had created and contribute meaningfully to prevention efforts. His evolution from enabler to advocate demonstrated the possibility of authentic personal growth and redemption through confronting the consequences of previous actions. The collaboration with David also created opportunities for me to examine my own growth and development since the original confrontation at Chateau Saint Michel. The woman who had been devastated by the discovery of wedding appropriation had evolved into someone capable of working professionally with the person who had enabled that violation, while maintaining appropriate boundaries and focusing on broader advocacy objectives. The experience of providing assistance to David while maintaining professional boundaries demonstrated the strength and confidence I had developed through years of advocacy work and organizational leadership. The ability to separate personal history from professional mission represented significant growth in emotional intelligence and strategic thinking that enhanced my effectiveness as an advocate and organizational leader. The Institute's work with David attracted attention from academic researchers studying restorative justice approaches to professional misconduct and white-collar violations. The collaboration provided evidence that identity appropriation could be addressed through comprehensive strategies that included prevention education, victim advocacy, perpetrator accountability, and transformation opportunities for individuals who recognized their previous mistakes. Dr. Sarah Kim, a professor of organizational justice at Northwestern University, incorporated our work with David into her research on alternative approaches to addressing workplace misconduct that focused on systemic change rather than individual punishment. Dr. Kim's research demonstrated that restorative approaches created more sustainable improvements in organizational culture than traditional disciplinary measures alone. The academic validation of our comprehensive approach to addressing identity appropriation reinforced the Institute's commitment to serving all stakeholders affected by these violations, including individuals who had previously engaged in harmful behavior but demonstrated genuine commitment to personal transformation and advocacy for prevention initiatives. As I reflected on the unexpected journey from providing assistance to my former husband to incorporating transformation narratives into our advocacy work, the experience demonstrated the complexity and nuance required for effective social change initiatives. The most impactful advocacy efforts often required engaging with individuals whose previous actions had contributed to the problems being addressed, while maintaining focus on broader prevention and protection objectives. The collaboration with David had strengthened rather than compromised the Institute's mission by demonstrating that our frameworks for addressing identity appropriation were sufficiently robust to serve diverse victim populations while creating opportunities for genuine accountability and transformation among individuals who had previously engaged in harmful behavior. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.